The galaxy watched in terror as humans stormed out of the assembly hall. The motion arrived on a Tuesday. Not that the conclave recognized human days of the week. They ran on galactic standard cycles, a calendar built by committee that satisfied everyone and matched no one's biology. But I had spent 11 years here and I still counted in Tuesdays. Some things you hold on to. Some things hold you back. The trick was knowing which was which. Counselor Dravon of the Veth placed the harmonization compact on the floor at the opening of the afternoon session without announcement, without preamble, and without looking at me. That last part was deliberate. 11 years had taught me the difference between someone who does not notice you and someone who is working very hard to make it look that way. Dravon had been working hard since I arrived. I was at the human delegation table. Owen, my aide, was 2 chairs to my right with his tablet and his careful expression. Owen was 29, sharp in the way that quiet people often are, and he had been working with me long enough to know that the stillness I carried into a session like this was not calm. It was something else. He knew better than to ask which. Dravon spoke for 40 minutes. The Veth communicated in layers. Spoken language on top. A subsonic frequency underneath that pressed against your sternum like a slow hand. The subsonic layer was biological, bred into Veth vocal structure over millions of years, and in formal addresses it did exactly what it was designed to do. You did not just hear Dravon. You felt him. The weight of him. The suggestion, transmitted below language, that he was larger than you and had been for a very long time. I had spent 3 months early in my posting learning to separate the 2 layers. Hear the words, register the frequency as data, do not respond to it as pressure. Helen's notes had flagged it specifically. She had written, the subsonic register is a dominance tool. Respond to the words. Do not respond to the frequency. I thought about Helen's notes often. I thought about them now. The motion's official title was the Veth Resource Harmonization Compact. It proposed reclassifying Earth's solar system as a protected resource zone under conclave jurisdiction. The language was clean in the way that dangerous things often are. It spoke of shared galactic heritage and responsible stewardship and the benefit of all member civilizations. It did not use the word ownership. It did not need to. The word was sitting inside every clause that transferred human administrative authority from sovereign to advisory, and you could feel it there the way you feel a stone in a shoe. Small and undeniable. When Dravon finished, the chamber went quiet in the particular way it does when 47 species are waiting to see who speaks first. Owen slid a note across the table to me. 17 co-signatories confirmed. Marin Collective among them. I looked at the note. I turned it face down. I had been to Marin space twice. The second time was 8 years ago, when their agricultural zones still showed the damage from the collapsed decade, the way burned fields show their shape long after the fire is out. We had sent teams. Technology. Personnel. The grain synthesis system we transferred had no patent, no license requirement, no fee structure. It was not a trade. A neighbor's house was burning and we had a hose. That was the full calculation. That was all of it. 8 years. 17 species. One of them Marin. I picked up my pen. Nora, my second delegate, was watching me from the corner of her eye. Nora had 30 years in the diplomatic corps, had negotiated 3 species treaties before setting foot in this building, and had a face that gave exactly nothing away. She was giving nothing away now. But she was watching. I addressed the chamber. I told them we would respond formally in 2 weeks. That we needed time to review the full text. We did not need 2 weeks. I had read the full text the night before. Nora knew that. Nobody asked. After the session I went back to the delegation office and pulled the Assembly's official file on the human delegation. Not our files. Theirs. The categorization document that the conclave's administrative body updated at the start of each major membership review. The classification header read: Category, unpredictable. Subcategory, contained. I sat with that word for a while. Contained. Like something managed. Like weather. I opened my notepad and started writing. Owen appeared with coffee and a look that meant he had something to say and was deciding whether to say it. He decided. Yara, he said. What are we doing? We are going to respond calmly, I said. Okay, he said slowly. That is not the reassuring statement it sounds like, I said. But it is true. He took the empty mug from yesterday and left. I wrote until midnight. The back-channel meetings began the next morning. They always did. A motion with real weight lands in this building, and within 12 hours the corridors fill with careful conversations. Species representatives appear at your door with tea and measured sympathy and the kind of concern that is really a question. How close to the edge are you, and how do we use that? I accepted every meeting. I listened to everything. I said very little. Counselor Avon of the Preth delegation came first. The Preth communicated through color shifts in their facial membranes, and Avon had learned to hold those membranes at a diplomatic neutral gold during high-stakes conversations. That had to take years of practice. I had always genuinely admired it. She sat across from me and explained that the motion had been a surprise to her delegation as well, that the VEF had moved quickly, that perhaps if humanity were to signal willingness to enter into preliminary discussions the momentum might slow. What kind of discussions? I asked. Preliminary ones, she said. I thanked her for her time. The Davari came next. Then the Sarati. Then a junior representative from the Marin Collective who was so visibly uncomfortable that I gave him better coffee than he had any right to and watched him try to find a way to begin. He never did. He thanked me, set down the cup, and left. Each meeting had the same architecture. Something that looked like solidarity. Something underneath that was a mapping exercise. They wanted to know the distance between my expression and my actual position. I gave them the expression. I kept the position. On the 5th day, Kate, my research aide, brought me the updated co-signatory count. Her face when she handed me the paper was the face of someone delivering something they wished they did not have to deliver. 19 species. 2 more had joined. One of them was the Davari, who had sat across from me 3 days earlier with their measured sympathy. The other was the Talek Consortium, who had sent their own team to Marin space 8 years ago. Alongside ours. I looked at the paper for a moment. Thank you, Kate, I said. She left. I did not look at the paper again. I did not need to. The number was already where it needed to be. Filed. Recorded. Added to the list I had been building every night since the session. On the 8th day, Voss requested his meeting. Voss was the Sirith senior counselor, had held the position for 6 years, and was one of perhaps 4 people in this entire building I had ever trusted in the complete sense of the word. Not because the Sirith were reliably aligned with humanity, but because Voss had a quality that was genuinely rare in the conclave. He meant what he said. Not always. But more often than most. He brought tea. Real tea, not the synthesized version the building's dispensers produced. His meeting room ran cool to match Sirith atmospheric preference, and the tea steamed well. I want to be honest with you, he said. I appreciate that, I said. My delegation is voting with the motion. I wrapped my hands around the cup. I know. I wanted you to hear it from me directly. Not from a report. This is direct, I said. I appreciate direct. He looked down at his cup. The Sirith carried regret in a very specific way, a slight drawing back of the secondary shoulder joint that was entirely involuntary and entirely readable if you had spent enough years paying attention. Voss was doing it now. The economic pressure from the VEF on smaller conclave members has been significant, he said. Several delegations that would have preferred to abstain were not offered that option. The vote count does not fully represent what is actually in this room. It rarely does, I said. Yara. He looked up. Everyone in that chamber knows what humanity has contributed. The medical research. The technology transfers. The border interventions. The grain work with Marin. Everyone knows. And yet, I said. He could not answer that. He tried. I watched him try. The Sirith were one of the few species in this building who processed ethical weight with genuine seriousness, and Voss was the best of them here. He looked for the word that covered it. He did not find one. I hope your response will be measured, he said finally. I always respond calmly, I said. That night I went back to the archive. Not the summary file. The complete membership record going back 43 years to first contact. Humanity's full history in this building. It took 4 hours to read. I am a fast reader. Technological contributions, documented. Resource sharing, documented. Conflict interventions, documented. The Marin grain transfer, one-line item among dozens, no notation, no special weight given to it. And running through every strategic assessment, every long-range evaluation, every classified analysis for 43 years, that word. Unpredictable. Not aggressive. Not territorial. Not dangerous. Unpredictable. As if the most alarming thing about humanity was not what we could do but our persistent refusal to do it the way the model said we would. 43 years of solving problems instead of calculating positions, of sharing technology instead of leveraging it, of showing up to burning houses with hoses instead of asking whose fire it was and what it was worth to put out. 43 years of that, and the conclave's verdict was, unpredictable. Contained. I closed the archive. I looked at my list. It was 10 pages now. Specific. Complete. Every item sourced. Every date recorded. I had spent 8 nights making sure nothing was missing and nothing was guessed at. Leon, my military advisor, appeared in the doorway at 10 that night. Leon was 54, had spent 20 years in the 3rd Orbital Corps before coming to the diplomatic side, and had the kind of stillness that comes from being in situations that require absolute clarity of thought. He looked at my desk. He looked at me. People are expecting a procedural challenge, he said. Legal objections to the motions framework. That is the standard approach. I know, I said. Are we using the standard approach? I looked at my list. Make sure the full delegation is present for the vote session, I said. Every seat filled. Dress formally. When I stand, they stand. Leon was quiet for a moment. He had seen things in his career that most people in this building had only read about. He was not easily unsettled. But there was something in his expression now that I had not seen there before. Yara, he said. What are we doing? Something we should have done a long time ago, I said. Go get some sleep, Leon. He left. I went back to writing. The vote session was set for 10 in the morning, Galactic Standard. I was at the chamber door at 9:45. The full human delegation was behind me. 41 people in formal attire, arranged with the practiced precision of people who had been told exactly what was about to happen and had decided, collectively, that they were ready. Owen was at my right shoulder. Nora was at my left. Leon stood at the back of the formation and said nothing. The chamber was already full. It was always full for votes of consequence. The gallery tiers above the main floor held observers from species not directly represented in this session, diplomatic staff, researchers, and what I always privately called the watchers, the ones who came specifically to see how things fell. I walked to the human table and sat down. Dravon was already at the dais. He arranged his papers one final time and looked up. I was watching him. He looked away first. The session chair called the assembly to order. The motion was read into the record. The floor was open for final statements before the vote. 3 delegations spoke. Their statements were careful and their arguments were familiar, and they lasted, combined, just over an hour. I listened to all of it. I wrote one note on my pad. I kept my face exactly where I needed it to be. Then the session chair indicated that the human delegation had the floor. I stood. 47 species, 212 delegates, the full apparatus of galactic diplomacy, and the room went so quiet I could hear the translation system's ambient hum. I placed my notepad on the table and did not look at it once. I would like to begin, I said, by reading a list. I read it. Every species in the chamber that humanity had materially aided since first contact. Not as an argument, I told them. As a record. I read it the way you read coordinates. Flat. Factual. No editorializing. 14 species. 11 separate incidents. The medical research shared with the Lorith during their viral collapse. The atmospheric stabilization technology given to the Sarati after the Harith disaster. The border intervention at Margin 7 that prevented an exchange the model said would have escalated to full engagement. The Marin grain synthesis transfer. One line item each. The room got very quiet around the 7th entry. It stayed quiet for the rest. When I finished the list, I let the silence sit for 3 full seconds. Then I reached into my folder and placed a document on the table in front of me. This is humanity's complete military capability assessment, I said. Updated as of this morning. I am not entering it into the record as a threat. I am entering it as a courtesy. Because in approximately 90 seconds it becomes relevant. I saw Dravan's hand stop moving on his papers. 90 seconds ago, I said, humanity began the process of withdrawing its recognition of this assembly's authority over human space. The room did not react immediately. The translation systems needed a moment. Then the room understood. It was not panic. It was something quieter and worse than panic. It was the specific silence of 47 species simultaneously calculating and finding that none of their models covered this. I want to be precise about what I am saying, I said. We are not leaving this assembly. We are not withdrawing our membership. We are withdrawing our recognition of this body's jurisdictional authority over territories defined under the original Human Sovereignty Accord. That accord predates this motion by 31 years. It was signed by 22 of the species currently represented in this room, including 11 of the 19 who co-signed today's motion. I picked up my notepad. I closed my folder. Humanity has been a member of this assembly for 43 years, I said. In that time we have contributed more in material, technology, and direct intervention than the record reflected until I read it to you this morning. We have done this without condition, without leverage, without using our contributions as a currency to collect later. We have done it because that is what we are. I buttoned my jacket. That has not changed, I said. What has changed is that we are no longer going to sit at this table while our home is redefined around us and call it diplomacy. I looked at Dravan for one moment. He looked back. I turned and walked toward the exit. The entire human delegation stood. Not fast. Not dramatically. They stood the way people stand when a decision has already been made and the standing is simply the physical form of it. They collected their materials. They followed. I heard, through the translation system, a Veth junior attaché make a sound that rendered in standard as, "Why are they not running?" The doors opened. We walked through them. The doors closed behind us. In the corridor the only sound was the ambient climate system and our footsteps. Owen fell in at my side. The feeds are all ready. I know, I said. Every major galactic relay is. I know. Yara. He stopped walking for one step. Just one. What happens now? I did not stop. Now, I said, we get to work. 72 hours after the walkout, the Conclave's intelligence services had filed 11 separate analyses trying to characterize what humanity was doing. None of them were right. They were looking for the mobilization, the warship movements, the ultimatum transmission, the escalation protocol. 43 years of observing humanity in the assembly had apparently convinced them that when humans finally broke from the diplomatic structure the result would look like every other species' version of breaking, fast, loud, aimed at a specific target. We were not fast. We were not loud. We had no specific target. We were building. Within 48 hours of the walkout, human construction vessels had moved into 3 separate systems on the outer edge of our recognized territory and begun work on relay stations. Not military installations. Communication and navigation infrastructure, the kind that takes years to complete and signals permanence the way a foundation laid in stone signals permanence. You do not build a relay station to use it in a conflict. You build one because you intend to be somewhere for a very long time. Alongside the relay work, 3 separate research installations broke ground in systems bordering the areas the Veth motion had targeted. Medical research, atmospheric engineering, deep space agriculture. Each of them positioned to serve both human populations and the populations of neighboring species who had never been offered much service by the assembly's existing structure. I coordinated this from a human administrative station 4 hours out from Verith Prime. A working station, not a ceremonial one. The kind that smelled like recycled air and had fluorescent panels that buzzed if you turned them all the way up. Owen worked from the room next door. Nora managed communications. Leon handled the construction coordination, which turned out to be his natural environment in a way that 2 decades of military service had always implied but never proven. He was in a better mood than I had seen from him in months. On the second day, Kate handed me the conclave's official response. It was not a declaration of anything. It was a procedural motion challenging the legality of our jurisdictional withdrawal, filed with the Assembly's administrative body, which would work its way through committee for somewhere between 8 months and 4 years depending on how many procedural delays were filed along the way. I read it once. I put it in the filing system. I went back to work. The construction reports came in every evening. I read every one. The relay station at Helm 3 was ahead of schedule. The agriculture ring at the Duran system had completed its foundation phase. The medical installation at Sarati border space was the one I had been most careful about. The Sarati had been among the 19. They had also been the recipient of the atmospheric technology after the Harith disaster. I had thought about that a great deal when I chose that location. I thought about what it would mean when the installation was finished. Who would use it? Who would ask why it was there? What it would cost them to ask. On the 4th night I was alone in the station's observation room. A small space with a wide viewport, the kind of design choice that says someone who built this place understood you occasionally need to look at something that is not a screen. The stars outside were unfamiliar in the specific way that stars are always slightly unfamiliar when you are far from the ones you grew up watching. I thought about Legos from the air. There was a photograph of it in my office at the Conclave building, taken from an orbital platform about 40 years ago, before the expansion development changed the shoreline. I had straightened it on my first day in that office and never taken it down. Something about the way the city sat at the edge of the water, like it was deciding whether to keep growing or stop, like it had not made up its mind yet. I thought about Helen. I had started writing the letter to her family 3 times over 11 years and deleted it 3 times. Her family was in Bristol. She had a sister and 2 adult children who had been told what they had been told, which was the official account, accurate in its facts and completely silent on its meaning. I had always felt that someone should fill in the meaning. I had always told myself I would do it when I had the right words. I thought I might have the right words now. I went back to my desk. The next morning Owen handed me a communiqué from the Marin Collective. Not from their assembly delegation. From their executive council. Direct. I read it twice. It was not quite an apology. It was not quite an explanation. It was the communication of a governing body that had made a decision under pressure and was now, in the aftermath of what that decision had set in motion, trying to locate something they had set aside. I wrote back 4 words. Not yet. But soon. Owen read the response over my shoulder. What does that mean? He said. It means they are scared enough to be honest now, I said. Give them a week. And then we talk, I said. For real this time. He nodded slowly. The Sarati have also reached out, he said. Informally. No official channel. One of their junior scientific staff sent a query about the medical installation at border space. Whether there would be capacity for non-human researchers in the early operational phase. I looked at him. When did that come in? This morning. Tell them yes, I said. Tell them the installation is designed for collaborative operation. Tell them we would welcome their researchers on day 1. Owen was writing this down. Should I route this through Leon for security review? This does not need a security review, I said. He looked up. Owen, I said. What is the worst-case outcome of a Sarati scientist working in our research installation? He thought about it for a moment. They learn things. They learn things, I said. About us. About how we work. About what it looks like when we build something and invite people in. I turned back to my desk. Send the reply. 3 days later I received a forwarded document from a contact in the Conclave administrative structure. It was a classified analysis prepared by the VETH Intelligence Service, distributed at senior diplomatic level, and apparently forwarded so many times that the list of recipients at the header was longer than the document itself. Its conclusion read, in translation from VETH: "We modeled human aggression. We modeled human withdrawal. We modeled human capitulation. We did not model human patience combined with human purpose. We have no historical precedent for a species that absorbs insult at a civilizational scale and responds by becoming more fully itself rather than less. We assess this as the primary concern." I read that 3 times. Then I put the document in the filing system next to the procedural motion. I never told Owen about it. Some things you carry for a while before you share them. That document was one. It confirmed something I had known for a long time but had never seen written down in someone else's words. The galaxy had been afraid of the wrong thing about us for 43 years. They were afraid of what we would do when we got angry. They had never considered what we would do when we decided. 6 months after the walkout, I was asked to return to the conclave chamber. Not summoned. Asked. In 11 years at this post I had received summons, mandates, formal requests, and procedural notices. This was a letter. Handwritten in the Sirith tradition, on paper treated with a compound that shifts color under direct light, fading from white to a pale green, that means, in Sirith culture, the closest thing they have to genuine vulnerability. Voss had signed it himself. The letter said that 11 species had proposed a new collaborative framework for unresolved border conflict mediation. That the proposal had originated from 3 of those 11 species approaching humanity's construction teams at the Duran Agriculture Ring with questions about operational methodology. That those conversations had grown, over 6 weeks, into something neither side had formally proposed but both had moved toward. That the group had grown to 11. That they were asking whether humanity would participate in formalizing it. Not as a military partner. Not as a dominant member. As what Voss called, carefully, a foundational contributor. He wrote that phrase and then added, in smaller script underneath, "I am not certain that is the right phrase. Tell me if you have a better one." I wrote back 2 words. "It is close enough." I walked into the chamber on a Tuesday. The room looked the same. It always looked the same. 40 years of history in it, and the lighting was still calibrated for the VETH's visual spectrum with secondary accommodation for 6 other species, which meant the humans always sat in something slightly too blue and slightly too cold, and I had adjusted to it the way you adjust to things that are not going to change regardless of what you prefer. Dravan was not there. His replacement was a younger VETH counselor named Sarith, who had been in the building for less than a year and who watched me enter with the specific attention of someone who has read extensively about a thing and is now seeing it in person for the first time. I noted it. Filed it. Did not look away until he did. Owen was behind me. Nora was to my left. Leon had stayed at the construction coordination station, which was where he was most effective. In his place I had brought Marcus, who had been in the delegation for 8 years and had the quality I needed most in this room today: patience. True patience. The kind that cannot be taught and cannot be faked, and that rooms like this will eventually test past its limit if you do not know your own. Marcus knew his. The session was not a formal vote. It was a framework signing ceremony, which in conclave protocol meant 3 hours of procedural formality before the document itself was touched. I had been through enough of these to navigate them correctly while most of my attention stayed on the room. The 11 species present had been selected by their own willingness to be there. They included 3 who had co-signed the original VETH motion. 2 of those 3 had reached out to Owen's office directly in the weeks after the walkout, before the construction projects were even complete. The 3rd had said nothing formally until the Sarati researcher inquiry traveled through their diplomatic network and reached their council's attention. I had not planned any of that. I want to be clear about that. People would later describe what happened in those 6 months as a long game. A designed outcome. A strategy that had been in place from the beginning. It was not. It was what you get when a species decides to simply be what it actually is, without calculating how that serves the current moment. We built the relay stations because we needed relay stations. We built the medical installation because there was a gap and we had the technology to fill it. We said yes to the Sarati researcher because of course we said yes. None of it was a move. All of it was us. The document was placed on the table at 2 in the afternoon. 11 species signed it. It was not an alliance. I had been very clear in the preliminary communications about what it was not. No mutual defense clause. No binding resource commitment. No jurisdictional authority granted to any central body, including and especially the existing assembly administrative structure. What it was, structurally, was a framework for ongoing relationship. For consultation. For the kind of conversation that happens between parties who have decided to be honest with each other about what they need and what they can offer. It had an exit provision but no penalty clause, because if you need a penalty to keep someone in a relationship, then the relationship is not the kind that helps anyone. Voss shook my hand after the signing. The Sirith handshake is performed with the secondary hand rather than the primary. That distinction means something specific in their culture. Primary hand contact is formal. Secondary hand contact is personal. He had never offered me the secondary hand in 9 years of knowing each other. He held my hand and worked out what he wanted to say. I could see him working it out. There was something he needed to give back to me, some weight he had been carrying for 6 months, and he was looking for the right shape for it. The Sirith were precise about language in the way that species are precise about the things that matter most to them. This mattered. He was not finding the words. I let him not find them for a moment. Then I said, "I know, Voss." He looked at me. "I know," I said again. "It is all right." He exhaled. One long, slow Sirith exhale that meant, in their body language, something closer to thank you than any spoken phrase they had in their vocabulary. We walked out into the corridor together and talked for a few minutes about the framework's operational calendar. By the time we reached the corridor junction where his office branch diverged from mine, we were talking about his daughter, who had just completed her first year of academic study and was apparently interested in xenolinguistics, and who Voss said had been asking questions about humans for months. "Tell her to come by the installation at Duran," I said. "We have 3 xenolinguists on the research team. She would enjoy it." He smiled. The Sirith smile looks like a human smile in most of the ways that matter. "She would," he said. "Thank you." He turned down his corridor. I walked back to the human delegation office. Owen had the day's communications ready. 3 informal outreach messages from species not part of today's signing. 2 from civilian populations rather than governments. 1 from a research institution on Davari 3 requesting information about the atmospheric methodology from the Sarati border space installation. I looked at them for a moment. "Prioritize the Davari research inquiry," I said. "That one first." "Understood," Owen said. "And Kate?" I looked over. Kate was at her desk, already pulling the construction reports from the morning cycle. "The relay station at Helm 3. Is it still on track for first activation?" "Ahead by 3 weeks," she said. "Good." I looked at the window. Outside, Verith Prime moved in its usual pattern, alien and organized and occasionally baffling and occasionally beautiful, the way places get when you have lived in them long enough to stop seeing them and then start it again. "Tell the team I want a small ceremony when it activates. Nothing formal. Just the people who built it." Kate was smiling. "I will tell them." I went into my office. I sat down. I did not pick up a communique. I did not open a report. I opened the drawer to my right and took out the letter I had been writing to Helen's family, the one I had started on the station 4 months ago and revised twice since and was now, I believed, finally right. It was 3 pages. Not long enough to be exhaustive and too long to be easy. It said what it needed to say. What she had been, what she had built here, what it had cost, what it had been worth. It said the things the official record did not say and never would. It said them in the plainest language I could find, because plain language is the only kind that carries weight across grief. I read it through once. I folded it. I addressed the envelope. I thought about Helen at this desk, writing those notes. The notes about the subsonic register, about Dravan's paper arranging, about which counselors to trust and to what degree. The notes that had kept me oriented in this place for 11 years, that had kept me from making the mistakes she could not warn me about directly because she ran out of time. I had been meaning to write this letter for 11 years. I had needed the right words. I had needed, maybe, to know enough of the story before I told the part one was responsible for. Not the whole story. Nobody knows the whole story while they are in the middle of it. But enough. Enough to know that the thing she had been building here, in those careful annotated files, had continued. That it had not been abandoned. That someone had picked it up and the carrying had mattered. I sealed the envelope. I set it in the outgoing tray. I picked up the Davari research inquiry and went back to work. Outside the window, Varith Prime moved. Stars above it. A galaxy still figuring out what it was afraid of, and finding slowly, somewhat to its own surprise, that the answer was not what it had spent 43 years preparing for. Here is the thing about humans. We are very patient people. We have had to be. The assembly spent 40 years deciding whether to fear us or use us, and in that time we were busy doing the one thing nobody thought to model. We were deciding what we wanted to be. They watched us walk out of that room and braced for the species they had built in their reports. The uncontrolled variable. The conquerors. The berserkers they had always expected us to become if they pushed far enough. They got us instead. Bless their hearts. The relay station at Helm 3 activated on a Tuesday morning. I watched it from the observation room, through the same wide viewport where I had stood 4 months earlier thinking about Lagos and Helen and right words. Owen was standing next to me. Nora was there. Leon, who had flown out from the construction site specifically for this moment, stood at the back of the room with his arms folded and the expression of a man who has built something real and knows exactly what that means. The station's running lights came on. One by one. A sequence that lasted about 40 seconds and at the end looked like a small, deliberate constellation against the dark. Nobody said anything. Then Owen said, quietly, "We built that." "We did," I said. "What do we build next?" I looked at the lights. I thought about the Marin Council meeting scheduled 3 weeks from now. The conversation that was going to be long and honest and not easy, and that I was looking forward to in the way you look forward to things that are genuinely worth doing. I thought about Voss's daughter and xenolinguistics and the installation at Duran. I thought about the Davari research inquiry and what could grow from 2 groups of scientists deciding to stop calculating and start talking. I thought about Helen's notes, still in the archive, still precise and practical and still useful to anyone who needed them. "Something that lasts," I said. We watched the lights for a while longer. Then we went back to work.